today I'm with Stefan Thurner, who is one of the Austrian, tell me what that was, Austrian Scientist of the Year, is that what it is?
Yes.
We were chatting over a beer and getting to know each other and trying to figure out what got you into science to begin with, and I want to share that with the audience. So take us back to when you were 13 and what was so interesting about science for you.
Yeah, when I was 13, I met a famous German scientist, one of the scientists who worked on the German atomic bomb. Mm-hmm. His name is Weizsäcker.
Okay.
And when I told him that I would like to become a philosopher, he told me that that's a good thing to do, because he held a chair of philosophy too.
Oh, did he?
In his later age. But before that, I should know how the world works. And for that, there's only one way of doing that, and that's to study physics.
Okay.
So, and I remembered that. And I started to study physics.
At the age of 13? At 13, you started
studying? No, not at 13. It took a couple of more years in high school.
Okay.
But by age 17, 18, I started studying physics.
Yeah.
And then got a PhD in particle physics.
Okay.
And was interested in studying the strong force, the force that keeps the most elementary particles together, the quarks. Mm-hmm. It's a very strange force.
Okay.
One of the four forces in physics. And it was very theoretical work that will maybe never, ever be testable experimentally, which got me more and more frustrated with it.
So you're going down this path and you're like, I'm just getting frustrated. But explain that, because we were talking about what was frustrating about, well, actually what was cool about this quirk. And it's that it gets stronger when you pull it apart, right?
Yes. The force between quarks is very special in the sense that it gets stronger and stronger the further you pull the two things apart. So, usually if you separate two things, like two magnets, force gets weaker.
Right.
But in the case of the strong force, the interaction gets stronger as you pull them apart, as if there was a rubber band between those quarks. But in reality, there's no rubber band.
Right.
So there must be something else, but there is nothing. It's just vacuum. And so vacuum must have a structure.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit hard to swallow in the beginning.
Yeah.
But if you assume a certain structure, then you can really understand how this force comes out of nothing, basically.
Wow.
And that was
interesting.
That was kind of work.
But you got frustrated and decided to change directions, or there's a fork in the road. Can you tell us about that?
I didn't decide to change directions at all. I was publishing in that field and going to conferences.
Yeah.
And at one particle physics conference, there was a after dinner speech of a particle physicist who didn't talk about particles and forces and physics. He was talking about mice and elephants and biology. And he was deriving with basic math things like that a mouse and the elephant and every mammal has about 1 billion heartbeats in its lifetime.
Okay.
And he could relate the energy consumption of a mouse to the energy consumption of an elephant and to all mammals on the planet. Could show why there's a very simple function, a very simple relation that connects all of these biological beings. Mm-hmm. And I just thought this was incredibly beautiful work.
Yeah,
and
sounds fascinating.
It is. It still is. So
right.
It's more than 20 years old now.
Yeah,
it's one of the masterpieces of complex system science, I would say. And I told the guy after his talk, I told him that I've never seen anything like this. Mm-hmm. And so we started talking a little bit, and after 2 days he invited me to his place in Los Alamos.
Yeah.
And for the summer, for a couple of months, to work with him. And when summer came, I couldn't enter the national lab because someone had stolen a hard disk, and foreigners couldn't enter easily.
Okay.
So he was newly appointed to the Santa Fe Institute, and he said, "Okay, then let's just get you to this institute." And that changed my life. Santa Fe Institute is a small institution in Santa Fe that was founded by heroes of mine, including Myrriah and Don Farmer and Ken Arrow, an economist. Many Nobel Prize winners are there, and what I've seen there is, for example, Myrriah, he won a Nobel Prize for particle physics, and but he wasn't working there on particle physics. He was working on languages, the origin of languages. He was writing a dictionary of a language that existed maybe 10,000 or 15,000 years ago.
Wow.
And was thinking about how did languages spread over the Americas.
Yeah.
And I've seen other physicists there who were working on completely unrelated things, not on physics,
right,
but on real world problems, but in a physics kind of way. Framework, and kind of physics thinking. And by physics thinking, I mean you try to understand it until you really understand it, until it works.
Yep.
And so what I've seen there, what I experienced there, is that people were working on problems that really interested them.
Yep.
And I figured out that even though I loved particle physics and the questions I was working on, it were not my questions. It were questions, that some other people found interesting, or a whole community found fundamentally important. And I just was drawn into that and started working on it. But it was not my
calling,
my thing, my calling. And so I learned that one should follow one's own
heart.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it was a lucky coincidence that at that time I got tenure. And from that year on, I went to this institute every year, still doing that. And it's fantastic.
So studying complex systems, right? That's the focus is complex systems. Can you explain what complex systems are?
So many people would maybe disagree with my definition of what a complex system is, but
they're not here. We're asking you. So.
It's all out of this room, so I can say it. Complex system is a system all complex systems are composed of many parts, and these parts are not independent of each other. But they're connected through a network of interactions, a very general thing.
Right.
So these parts can be, I don't know, neurons in the brain, or it can be banks in a financial system, or it can be cells in a body, or it can be companies in the economy, or people in a society, and they're connected. Through those connections, these elements of that system, they can change. The elements are not static. Banks are not always
one size.
They change every day. That size changes, and the size changes only as a result of the interactions with the others.
Right. Deals being made, or credit that's made, or speculations that were made. They determine the wealth of an institution in the next time step. Right.
So you have a network that changes the states of the elements of the complex system. But that's still not the whole story yet. That's not a complex system yet. If the elements change their states, they will also change the interactions. So if I'm becoming very rich, I might change my friends.
Exactly.
I'll stick around with other rich guys, or I don't know.
Exactly.
But stupid example, but so if the states change, the interactions change, and if the interactions change, the states change, we get this chicken egg problem.
Right.
Interactions change elements, elements change interactions, and now you have a complex system. That's the kind of thing that makes a thing complex.
It strikes me that a lot of these complex systems are self-evolving and not looking at it. So we'll just pick on banking and financial systems for a second. And it's like a lot of times people don't look at making them efficient. It just kind of grows on its own.
Right.
And so it sounds, from what our discussions were, that examining and studying the complex systems allows you to perhaps then impact and have more control and make it more efficient.
Right.
Because
right.
they may not be efficient, and often they're not.
So typically complex systems just evolve, and they're not designed.
Right.
And very often these systems are also not manageable. But now the situation is kind of changing because for the first time we see those interactions. It's what we call big data.
Right.
And we see not only the interactions, we also see the states, how they change.
Right.
So telephone companies know every cell phone call in the country. So that's basically all the interactions that humans do with their voice. Huh?
Right.
And banks know the bank accounts.
Exactly.
That's the states of people.
Right.
And how do these interactions change the states? We cannot pull all this data together, but we could. Yeah, we cannot do it for privacy reasons, of course. But we're beginning to see all those interactions, and we do so more and more. We're putting sensors nowadays everywhere.
Exactly.
More and more sensors. The number of sensors is growing exponentially fast.
Yeah.
And these sensors produce data. And all what that data is either about states of components or elements, or it's about interactions.
Yeah.
If you put it together, you have data about complex systems in most cases. So for the first time, you can make an experimental science out of complex systems. What we could do in the past 50 years was to theorize, to make theorems, to make to write equations and to make algorithms, etc. But we couldn't put the force on the ground.
Exactly. So there's
now we
a lot
can.
of theory, but now
lots
we've
of theory,
got the
and now we
data.
got the data to test it.
Right.
And we can throw maybe lots of theory overboard and keep some that really works.
Right.
And it's really, really, really fascinating.
Sounds like it'll have a huge impact on being able to make markets more efficient, banking more efficient, finance more efficient. And this is one area, right? But it sounds like
not only more efficient, also more stable.
Right.
That are more, and maybe more efficient and more robust or resilient at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah.
We can, by just now measuring the system in terms of its interactions and states, we can invent new measures like temperature. When does a system get into a state where it becomes unstable, volatile? Under what conditions is one shock important for a system in the sense that it could tip the system over into collapse?
Right.
When is the same shock not relevant at all?
Right.
So the same shock in a complex system can do very different things. But we don't understand now how that works. But we will know. I'm convinced about that. And this is scientifically uncharted land. It's a map that's white.
Yeah.
And you can still put your flag on it.
Yeah.
And it's not very expensive.
It's also very disruptive. One of the things that we see a lot of famous founders, entrepreneurs that are disrupting systems, questioning things, and I'm gonna equate this to some of the things I've read about Elon Musk and how he looks at the world and how he looks at, trains haven't changed in 100 years. Why not? So the fact that he's questioning things to then rethink the physics of it and find better solutions sounds very similar, and that's very disruptive. This is very disruptive. And hey, here's the data. What can we do with this data to make things more efficient?
Right.
And we're picking on banking for a second, but the other thing that an article that I read was on that you were in was on health systems, which I think is really fascinating, on the network and the complex systems of the healthcare system, because you've got for years you've had studies that colleges and doctors do, but a lot of times to collect that data, it's taken a small sample size over years of time and then go back and say, okay, here's what we found. But what I'm hearing you say is now we can collect all this data now and make decisions much quicker. So you want to explain how the complex system of medical science is. Yeah.
So again, to think of the healthcare system, or more generally about medicine in terms of networks, you have to kind of distill networks out of data.
Yeah.
So what is our data? We're in a unique situation that we have anonymized healthcare records of about 10 million people in a small country, and it's every time a patient sees or interacts with the healthcare system, we get a data line produced that contains the diagnosis, the site diagnosis, the prescriptions, and the information if a drug was bought, at what price, where, when.
If it's continued to be used, or if they've switched drugs, or all
so
that data.
we see the same anonymized patient popping up in this data for multiple times, and then we can extract the health trajectories, or also the sequence of how and which drugs were bought. And from that we can read off what drug works. If the drug is bought all the time, it might work. If it's changed to another one, it might not have worked, or it might have caused side effects that were not liked. If the person buys other drugs to compensate for side effects or something, we see that, and we see if dosage is changed. So we see if something gets better or worse. So we can follow in very high precision the changes in the health state of patients. So what we also see is which patient has not only what disease or what problem, but we see the combinations of problems that patients have at the same time. And that allows you to extract a network of a certain kind. And you have to imagine that network as a network where the nodes are diseases. Right. And there's a link between those diseases if many people have it at the same time. And if you take all of the diseases, you get a network. It looks nice. Right. And what the first thing that you observe is that network is not the same for children or youngsters or adults or elderly people. It changes over time. And if you know how that network changes over time, and if you can identify yourself in that network, if you know you're female, you're 40 years old, and you have this and that problem now, you just look at the network, how that looks 10 years later, and you can predict what you will have, given your state now, what you will have in the future with high precision.
But you're not waiting 10 years. You're
We're not
actually,
waiting-
you're
yes.
actually looking at the next network, which is 10 years older. The
Yes.
sample size is 10 years older.
Yes.
So now there's predictability of, hey, if you've got these two things or three things, there's a high probability that this is going to happen. So
Exactly.
that opens up for prevention.
Exactly. That's the thing we're aiming at. Of course, if you start to prevent these things, our prediction is going to be wrong.
Right.
But you will be healthy.
We could be wrong, but you'll be healthier. So thank us anyway.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found fascinating is you were talking about insulin and its effect on tumors.
Right. Yes.
So what you were able to, like, in your studies, be able to see very clearly.
So we took all patients from that sample of 10 million people that have diabetes and are treated with insulin.
Okay.
So if you're heavy diabetic, you're treated with insulin. And then we checked for all the diseases that people have together with diabetes and are treated with insulin. And we found that's not we're not the first to see that if you take insulin, you have enhanced probability for creating certain tumors.
Right.
And the thing that we found is if we look at people who take insulin and something else, can be completely unrelated to
Maybe it was treating
diabetes.
something else that they had.
Exactly,
Right.
like statins or something. If you take statin in combination with insulin, it's protective. It suppresses tumor growth.
Got it.
And that's not a small effect. It's not we're not saying with tiny probability there's maybe a little effect in that direction. No, it's a massive effect.
Yeah.
And so by just letting the computer search for all sorts of combinations of drug use, you can discover completely unexpected I don't know, combinations of drugs that are good for something,
Right.
that you never thought of.
That's so fascinating.
And,
And it's by the trial and error of what's happened with the data set of the 10 million people that are doing these things in their own bodies and minds and their own systems. But then you combine all that data, you can extract combinations that are better for you.
We're not doing harm to anyone.
Right.
Everything has happened. Everything is anonymized. We cannot identify those patients. We cannot sell this data to insurance companies, and that's all impossible. The cool thing is we're taking something without any risk to anyone, and do medicine with it.
Exactly. That's really cool. What other areas of complex systems really fascinate you other than medicine and financial networks?
One thing that's hard to communicate is that I'm interested in the statistics of complex systems. That's math. So we all know that there exists something that's called statistics, and it's this bell-shaped curve of business.
Yeah.
And we all kind of know how to deal with that. But if you look at complex systems, then you don't have bell-shaped curves. You have curves that look very strange. It's called fat-tail distributions.
Okay.
And it just reflects that you have situations with complex systems that you have many outliers. Outliers are typical. So large deviations from the norm are the norm.
Right.
And that's what makes complex systems so hard to manage, that you have this large number of outliers. And the mathematics of this is not really yet understood, how to manage systems that have these many outliers.
Yeah.
And I know it's hard, it's very abstract, but it's a very fascinating thing in mathematics.
What would you, so one of the things that the goal of the podcast and our listeners is just kind of to help people understand the work that's being done, but also, if you're still questioning what you want to do with your life, perhaps just follow your heart. What would your advice be to, a 13-year-old out there that's trying to figure out what they're trying to do? What would your advice be?
So if you want to understand the world, then you have to study physics.
I like that. You're like, I'm just going to copy something that was told to me at 13.
I think
it worked for you.
It's what I really keep from that conversation with this famous physicist Weizsäcker is that you have to learn something very specific, very very deep. Can be very boring, very 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 how do you say, disciplinary.
Yeah.
And then you can branch out.
Right.
I think it's bad advice to say become as interdisciplinary as from the start on.
Got it. Yeah.
I think the right way is to become good in something, really get trained. If it's narrow, okay, you just have to go through that narrow path and then branch out.
It's fascinating.
Never start from everything in the beginning. You will be confused. You will not learn any technique. You will not understand how science works.
Yeah.
Science is a very, very particular game. And if you don't learn that from early on, you will never learn it later.
It's a very interesting parallel between what you just said and what I hear some of the entrepreneurs that we interview, on some of those founders interview. Everybody's got a life path, and you always learn lessons from what you're doing. So, for example, one of the recent interviews we did is John Paul DeJoria, who started John Paul Mitchell Products and then Patron and so on and so forth. But prior to starting John Paul Mitchell Products, he was in two different salons. And so it was just kind of this, he never knew that he was going to do this, but it took his life path and the failures that happened in his life path to get to the next level. And so you're always learning. You're always learning. And so what I'm hearing you say is, whatever passion you're doing, go deep, right? And understand it, because even if you're not going to do it for life, it can transition to the next thing, which is what's happened in your life. And it's now taking you a whole different direction, which sounds like the first direction you were in was wonderful, but you were answering questions somebody else was asking. And now you're having more impact because you're able to answer questions that you have, plus help society at the same time.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the time that you've had with us on the show. It's been super fascinating understanding what you're doing, and I'm going to definitely follow you. Is there a somewhere where people can follow you, like a social media or anything like that people can follow your work? Or
yes, we're setting up a new center in Vienna. Complex Systems Science, Complexity Science Hub, Vienna. We call it. It's supposed to be something like a baby sister of the Santa Fe Institute, but in Europe. Yeah. And we show very, very clearly what we're doing there.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely get the links and put them up on our show. So if anybody's interested in following you and your work, which is amazing, they'll be able to follow you and also maybe get inspired to do their own thing.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.